The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today we will discuss another shocking story of husband-fatal betrayal. Born into a wealthy family in England, Peter Chadwick led a comfortable and privileged existence. Peter had the greatest education possible from a young age thanks to his father, a multi-billionaire real estate investor. He received a strong academic background and attended respected schools. Peter's family moved to the Bryn Mawr High School when he was a teenager. Peter attended Arizona State University to continue his study after high school. He met Qui Chu Lim, who most people call QC, at this time. QC was born into a wealthy and well-connected Malaysian family. She was the younger sister of a well-known businesswoman who ran the nation's biggest producer of latex gloves. Peter and QC clicked right away despite having quite different personalities. QC was renowned for being gregarious and quick-witted, whereas Peter was quiet and socially shy. They dated throughout their time in college since their differences initially drew them together. According to his acquaintances, Peter was infamously hard to get to know. QC, on the other hand, was well known for having a lively and captivating personality. She always made those around her laugh and was the light of the party. She was a magnet in her social circles because of her brains and contagious charm. Peter and QC eventually got married and moved to Newport Beach, California. Millionaires lived in this charming area, with their opulent villas along the streets. With their fancy automobiles and fine outfits, Peter and QC blend in perfectly. They were surrounded by people who had similar lifestyles and lived in the lap of luxury. QC stayed at home and took care of the house and their expanding family, while Peter maintained his father's properties and spent a lot of time at home. QC made sure her 3 sons had the finest life has to offer because she was a committed and motivated parent. She encouraged them to work hard in their studies and get good scores since she thought that a well-rounded education was important. She also taught them the importance of cooperation and physical fitness by encouraging them to play sports and engage in extracurricular activities. QC wished for her sons to have an international outlook. She believed that by exposing kids to many languages and cultures, they would gain a more comprehensive perspective on the world. She took her sons on many excursions to expand their horizons because she thought that travel was important. QC felt that travel was an important educational opportunity that would help her sons grow into well-rounded young men, whether it was seeing old ruins or experiencing other cultures. The Chadwick family maintained their modesty and privacy in spite of their prosperity and fortune. In order to concentrate on their family and close-knit ties, they would rather keep to themselves. But everyone knew QC and Peter, and at the end of the day, they were frequently spotted picking up their sons from the bus stop. In anticipation of seeing one of their parents, QC and Peter's 2 youngest sons stepped off the school bus on Wednesday, October 10, 2012, a warm and bright day in California with temperatures in the 70s. But there were no parents at the bus stop. As soon as QC and Peter's neighbors saw the boys standing by themselves at the bus stop after 4 p.m., she realized something was up. Neither Peter nor QC would have left their kids abandoned. The guys were picked up and driven home by the neighbor. But there was no response when she reached the door. QC's vehicle was in the driveway, but Peter's was not. The neighbor arrived at the Chadwick house and saw multiple packages on the doorstep, suggesting that no one had been home during the day. Given that Peter worked from home and QC was a stay-at-home parent, someone ought to have been there to pick up the deliveries. But nobody appeared to be home. The neighbor decided to intervene after growing more and more concerned. After returning home with QC and Peter's youngest sons, she called the police to ask for a welfare check on the Chadwick residence. Officers looking into QC and Peter Chadwick's disappearance showed up at the Chadwick residence in Newport Beach. They arrived and inspected the house's exterior in great detail. They saw that no indications of forced entry were present. Once inside, the cops discovered the living room, which was immaculately restored. Vacuum lines were clearly visible on the carpet, suggesting that it had just been vacuumed. As the officers toured the residence, they noticed that it displayed pictures of what seemed to be a normal, contented family. The officers then proceeded to the kitchen, where they observed a dinner being made but not yet done. The person preparing the food seemed to have disappeared. The dish had been abruptly interrupted, as shown by the strewn-about tools and ingredients. When they couldn't discover any leads below, the investigators went upstairs and up the stairs of the Chadwick house. The officers found evidence of assault when they entered QC and Peter's bedroom. Blood was visible, a shattered vase was on the edge of the tub, and the bathroom floor rug was bundled in the corner of the space. The cops quickly called for assistance after making the decision to declare the house a crime scene as a result of this discovery. When crime scene investigators got to the Chadwick house, they saw right away that a safe in the bedroom in QC had been opened, and that nothing was inside. The detectives thought that money and critical documents might have been stolen as a result of this discovery. Their suspicions about the couple's location were heightened by the empty safe. Detectives reached out to the coroner's office, hospitals, and jails in the absence of solid leads. To find out if anyone who fit the couple's description had been arrested or admitted, they carried out a comprehensive search. Their attempts, however, were unsuccessful, which increased worries about what might happen to Peter and QC. Peter Chadwick made a worrisome phone call to the San Diego Police Department on October 11, 2012. He stated that he was making the call from an Arco gas station around 100 miles away from the Chadwick's Newport Beach home. Peter behaved erratically and babbled on incoherently during the call. Peter claims that he hired Juan to provide an estimate for painting his house on October 10th. Peter said he had met Juan when he was touring a complex of apartments that he oversees. Peter continued to work on his computer downstairs while Juan walked upstairs to inspect the walls for potential future painting. Peter was deep in concentration when he heard his wife, QC, calling his name from the master bedroom upstairs. He hurried upstairs out of instinct and discovered Juan strangling QC in the bedroom. Peter tried to step in, horrified and in a panic, but Juan held him back with a Swiss Army knife and carried on attacking QC. Peter claimed that he and Juan got into a fight, but by the time he said this, QC had already passed away. According to Peter, Juan forced him to wrap QC's body in a green comforter when he passed away, and the two of them then loaded QC's body into the back of Peter's Lexus. He claimed that while QC's body was in the back seat, Juan made him drive around Southern California. Peter claims that he was stopped by a California Highway Patrol officer, but the officer released him. According to Peter, he drove to an Arco gas station around 4 miles from the Mexican border while carrying Juan and QC's body. Juan made contact with his friend, Chi, at this petrol station. Peter was left at the petrol station when Chi arrived, and they took QC's body into a van and left the area. Peter told a dispatcher over the phone that he thought Juan and Chi were going toward Mexico, where they would dismember and dispose of QC's body. Peter Chadwick was hauled into the police department for an interview after being met by cops at the Arco station. The investigators looking into QC's disappearance made note of a number of alarming aspects during the interview. First of all, Peter's torso was covered in scratches, indicating that there had been a fight. Suspicions were heightened when the detectives noticed a human bite mark on Peter's forearm. Peter showed no emotion when asked about the purported circumstances of his wife's abduction. The detective's suspicion was bolstered by this uncommon absence of feeling. In addition, Peter showed no signs of caring for his kids during the interview. Another red flag for the investigators was that he didn't inquire about them or show any care for their safety or well-being. The investigators went back to the Chadwick residence to carry out their investigation after apprehending Peter. When they got back, they saw that the walls had just been painted. The police were perplexed by the revelation because it went against Peter's assertion that he had just hired Juan to provide a painting estimate. If the house had just been painted, why would he have hired someone to do a paint estimate? They continued looking for proof to support Peter's allegations after this contradiction cast more doubt on his account. Detectives were able to obtain important video evidence from the Chadwick family's manned guard shack in a gated community. The detectives noticed Peter Chadwick's SUV driving off the property on the video taken on October 10th at 1:30 p.m. They were unable to ascertain whether Juan or QC's bodies were also within the vehicle, though. Additional video footage of Peter's car passing through a toll booth on a freeway was discovered after more research. It appeared from the video that there was just one person in the vehicle. The investigators were suspicious of this difference from Peter's initial account. The California Highway Patrol officer who stopped Peter Chadwick on October 10th was subsequently questioned by the detectives. The fact that Peter was the sole person in the car was verified by this officer. Detectives found a handwritten note from QC outlining Peter's unsettling Google searches that she had seen, in addition to the video evidence. How to torture was one of the searches that was mentioned in the letter. The police learned that QC had recently received a diagnosis of sexually transmitted illnesses after looking over her medical records. Later, it was found that Peter was not using protection and was having affairs. He therefore brought the illnesses home to QC. During their probe, a number of QC's close pals disclosed the facts. Peter resisted when QC brought up the subject of divorce with them, according to QC's pals. Peter would never consent to a divorce since it would jeopardize his financial security, according to QC's pals. In the event of a divorce, Peter would no longer have access to the substantial riches that QC has. Peter was taken into custody and accused with his wife's murder on October 11, 2012. He maintained his innocence throughout the court processes by entering a not guilty plea to the allegations. 1 week following Peter's arrest, investigators were called by Peter's lawyer. Peter was willing to give the cops the location of QC's body, the lawyer told them. According to Peter, it was in Wildcat Canyon in South San Diego. Wildcat Canyon is an off-the-beaten-path mountainside location. Peter also reported that the body was discovered in a nearby dumpster. The crime scene detectives immediately went to the designated spot after learning this information. When they arrived in Wildcat Canyon, they concentrated on the dumpster that Peter had mentioned. They found a number of QC-owned things within the dumpster. Her pocketbook, identification card, and substantial cash amounting to $20,000 were discovered. Additionally, a green comforter was discovered in the dumpster by the investigators. They thought it was a component of QC's body when closer inspection revealed that it had arms and legs. Disappointingly, the discovery proved that the police had actually located QC's remains. An autopsy conducted at the medical examiner's office confirmed that the body was QC and that strangulation was the cause of death. The judge gave Peter Chadwick $1 million bail despite the fact that he was charged with the horrible crime of murder. Due to his 3 boys and lack of criminal background, Peter was deemed to have ties to the state. His release was subject to restrictions that included giving up his passport, making sure he couldn't leave the nation, and preventing him from communicating with QC's family in any way. Peter lived in Santa Barbara with his father while he was out on bond. He made an attempt to spend time with his 3 sons during this period and faithfully attended all of his court appearances. But the real reason for his behavior was that he was preparing to flee. Peter had made multiple cash advances on his credit cards and emptied his safe deposit box without the cops knowing. A major search was launched to find Peter after it was found that he had disappeared. The detectives had a hard time finding Peter because of his affluence. Eventually, they turned to the United States for help. Marshals, in the hopes that their knowledge and resources would enable them to locate Peter. The police learned that Peter had taken a taxi to Santa Barbara Airport after reviewing airport CCTV. When Peter arrived, he spent a little period of time sitting in the airport before departing once more. Video of the taxi that picked Peter up and drove him to an unidentified location was obtained by the detectives. The police searched Peter's Santa Barbara home extensively in an attempt to learn more about his whereabouts. They found a substantial volume of Canadian-related books and DVDs throughout this search. They also discovered books about living life on the run. The detectives deduced from their analysis of the material that Peter was probably en route to the Washington border with the goal of entering Canada. Statements gathered from Peter's sons added fuel to the detectives' suspicions. They disclosed that their father had told them about his intention to flee. With the ultimate goal of reconnecting with his sons, Peter had expressed his plan to walk across the Canadian border and take a low-paying work in order to save money. The United States for 3 years. Marshals pursued leads when Peter was spotted in Canada, but their attempts kept coming up empty. For several years, scores of officers and countless leads had been involved in the search for Peter Chadwick, who was wanted for evading justice. But the hunt appeared pointless, and the case remained unresolved. The detectives made the decision to take up Peter Chadwick's case again in August 2018. They felt that in order to hold him accountable, a more forceful strategy was required. Consequently, a detective went to their department's public information office and talked about the possibility of reopening the case internationally. The public information officer and the detective deliberated and decided that a new push was required. It was important to get the word out since the officers thought Peter Chadwick may have escaped anywhere. The investigator and the public information officer believed that a podcast about the case could successfully generate new leads and increase awareness, especially considering how popular podcasts were in 2018. The first edition of the podcast, which they called Countdown to Capture, debuted in September 2018. Interest in the Chadwick case skyrocketed as soon as the podcast was released. The tip line was inundated with tips from all over the world, including places as distant as Japan and Ukraine. Detectives received important information from people who said they had seen Peter Chadwick in a variety of locations. In an additional effort to help locate Peter Chadwick, the U.S. He was listed as one of the 15 most wanted by the marshals, who also offered a $100,000 reward for information that led to his capture. People were more inclined to come forward with any information they had because of this reward, which raised awareness. In the podcast Countdown to Capture's last episode, the lead detective left his target a direct message. The detective urged Peter to think about how his actions would affect his sons and made it apparent that it was time for him to finish this investigation. The detective told Peter sternly that the cops would be on his trail shortly. In pursuit of Peter, the investigators and U.S. Marshals discovered that when Peter ran from justice years ago, he went to Mexico rather than Canada. They found out that Peter was hiding in Pátzcuaro, which was the perfect place for him to blend in and avoid detection. Mexico's Michoacán state is home to the quaint village of Pátzcuaro. It is renowned for its classic colonial architecture, which includes cobblestone streets and buildings with vibrant paint jobs. The city's vibrant marketplaces and traditional handicrafts, including woodworking, textiles, and pottery, are well known. Peter claimed to be a relative of the people who vanished on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 when he checked into a budget hotel under the name Paul Cook. He was able to keep a low profile and win the trust of the community thanks to this astute strategy. In order to find an apartment while he was in Pátzcuaro, Peter turned to a local realtor. The realtor, however, subsequently characterized him as odd and soulless. Peter was able to connect with a woman named Claudia Soto in spite of his odd conduct. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Peter, Claudia, and Claudia's sister went to a concert in May 2016. During the trip, Claudia's sister saw Peter driving strangely and requested him to slow down. Peter proceeded to drive recklessly in defiance of the law, which resulted in a collision. Claudia Soto lost her life in the tragedy, while her sister was gravely hurt. She spent 15 days in a coma. In the meantime, Peter limped off. The Soto family was visited by the district attorney's office following the tragic event that claimed Claudia's life and seriously injured her sister. They were requested to sign a paper that granted Paul Cook amnesty in Claudia's death. In addition to portraying Paul Cook as a decent man who was not involved in the incident, the document cleared him of all guilt. The family decided to sign the documents without hesitation, despite the great anguish caused by Claudia's passing and the sister's suffering. But once the immediate shock and grief subsided, they came to the realization that they had made a grave error. Regretfully, it was already too late. The primary suspect in the investigation, Peter Chadwick, had once again escaped. While the search went on, the U.S. Peter was discovered by marshals in Valdebravo. The Mexican state of Puebla is home to the quaint little village of Valdebravo. It is renowned for its lush forests, lakes, and beautiful views. After seeing a TV investigation report about him, Peter started to get scared. He was certain that the marshals had located him when his iPad stopped functioning 2 hours later. Consequently, Peter hurried out of town and went to Cholula. With a history spanning thousands of years, Cholula is regarded as one of the world's oldest cities still inhabited. It is well known for its illustrious past, rich cultural legacy, and the town's well-known Cholula hot sauce. The town's traditional dance and music, which frequently featured vibrant costumes and exuberant performances, are well known. The detectives got a tip in August 2019 that helped the U.S. Marshals are focusing on where Peter is. They located Peter in a day and took him into custody right away. After that, he was extradited to the United States to stand trial for his wife's murder. Peter acknowledged his culpability by entering a guilty plea to the charge. Given the seriousness of Peter's crimes, the court overseeing the case sentenced him to 15 years to life.